Welcome to episode
666
of the Entertainment 2.0 podcast, brought to you by thedigitalmediazone.com. I'm Josh Pollard.
And I'm Richard Gunther, and this is the show that puts you in control of your favorite movies, music, shows, and game.
But not tonight.
No, not on episode
666.
Richard, we're trying to be spooky and stuff here. We're not good at it. We're not scary people. But
No.
a couple of months ago, we realized if we play our cards right, if we can actually keep a consistent recording schedule, we could release episode 666 the week of Halloween. And we worked, we made it happen. And we're really excited to do something different I really wish that we could have come into this and said, 11 years ago when we started, I don't even know how many, no, it's like 15 years ago when we started this show.
We planned.
Right. No, this really only goes back to like August, but that was still a fair amount of planning to get us here to 666 on Halloween. And so we wanted to do a different show, something fun. So we're going to talk about spooky media and the traditions that we might have around it, the scary movies, scary books, scary shows, all of those types of things that we're going to go through them on this episode to set the mood for your Halloween. So, Richard, I think we got to start with scary movies. Like that is what I think of when it comes to Halloween and media and scary movies. And I think we should jump straight into the most scary movie. Like, what's the scariest movie you've ever seen?
Yeah, so I don't really like scary movies all that much. Well, let's kind of be a little bit more specific about that. I don't like jump scares. So there's a lot of movies that are just kind of right out because they go for the jump scare. But I do enjoy a thriller. I do enjoy good scary movies, and I do enjoy usually a psychological thriller. And along those lines, the most scary movie that I have ever seen as an adult to this day, still nearly 40 years later, for me anyway, is The Exorcist. That movie just kind of tore at your assumptions of religion and family and support systems and rip them out from under you. And I think it was probably 2 nights. I'm an adult when I see this for the first time. I live alone. And for the 2 nights after I watched that film, I kept my lights on.
Wow.
I did not turn the lights out. This movie just freaked me out big time. And to this day, I don't want to watch it through again.
Wow. That's a really good first pick. And if you're keeping your lights on as an adult, that says a lot.
Right?
That says a lot. Wow.
Yeah.
I think I've only seen The Exorcist in chunks. Maybe I've seen part of it like at parties and stuff like that. But that movie is freaky. That's a good pick. That's a good pick. So my pick, Richard, is it actually plays an important role in my life because the scariest movie that I've seen is also what I did for my first date with Jen, who eventually became my wife.
Oh, wow. That's an interesting selection for a first date. I don't even know what it is, but
Yep. So our first date, we went to see the movie The Ring. And that gives you a time period there.
Yeah.
That movie was super, super creepy. And neither of us were super into scary movies. Like everybody, I think, as a teenager has that phase of their life when they're into creepy movies. But this one, they really did a good job with this. And,
yes.
it it was just more of that like suspenseful, like it wasn't all about jump scares and stuff. It's just like if you imagined yourself in this scenario, you would be so terrified. And it did it really, really, really well. In fact, it did it too well because after that, Jen was like, nope, I'm done with scary movies. I can't handle this.
Right.
They give me too much anxiety. And like, that's kind of the point, right? Like you're supposed to be anxious, but it's just too much. And the next scary movie that Jen saw was A Quiet Place. Like that's like, there's almost 20 years of a gap between those two movies coming out. So, but it was really good. You know, I think if we were picking runner-ups, it would have to be Blair Witch Project. That movie.
Oh, I still haven't seen that.
Seriously?
Seriously.
Oh man. And I saw that in theaters when they were doing such an awesome job of marketing this movie as like, no, this is real. This isn't just a movie. Like this was real footage. And so you're watching it going, is this real? I don't know if this is actually real. It's really, really creepy.
Yeah. All the more reason I didn't want to see it when it came out, right? I mean, it was just, that was not one. And that was a jump scare movie too.
Yeah.
And that was just right out for me. Back to The Ring. I mean, you mentioned that movie is just another classic and also a bit of a psychological thriller.
Mm-hmm.
And enough so freaked me out enough that I didn't want to watch the follow-up. Like I did not want to watch The Ring 2.
Yeah, I never got to see the follow-up because I would have had to have watched it alone.
Were you scared?
I mean, a little, of course. Like, but that's
not the
point,
kind of movie
right?
that you definitely want. You don't want to watch a movie like that alone. I mean, that's a movie that you want to like, cuddle up with your partner while you're watching that because you're scared, right?
Right. Yeah. Okay,
crazy.
So those are some of the scariest movies we've watched. But Richard, do you have a favorite Halloween movie? Because it doesn't sound like you're going back and watching The Exorcist again.
No, yeah, my favorite, and there's a number of movies out there, and we can talk about them a little bit more. But I think by far my favorite is the original Hocus Pocus with Bette Midler and others in it. It was just a lot of fun. It's silly. It's entertaining. It has great actors in it. It's a movie that I think holds up after all these years. I didn't really like Hocus Pocus 2, and I hear there's a chance they may be making a third. So I hope it's better than the second. But yeah, absolutely, Hocus Pocus.
Nice. So
how about you?
So that's one that you're watching fairly regularly.
Pretty regularly.
Halloween. Okay. So I don't really have a Halloween tradition, and I've not gone back to rewatch The Ring. That is for darn sure. But there is, like you, I do really enjoy the more psychological movies, and I wouldn't call this a Halloween movie, but maybe. But it's absolutely one of my all-time favorites, and it's in that psychological thriller genre. And that's the movie Seven. I loved Seven. And
wow.
It's not really a horror movie, but it's it's definitely psychological weirdness, tension, and like there's some creepiness going on there, and yeah, like that just feels like one of those all-time classic movies to me. And I'm not a movie buff. Maybe real movie buffs are like, come on, Josh, you got to pick some. I don't know. Seven was a great movie. Like that is a movie that the first time you watched it, you just like when that movie's done, you're just like stunned in silence and you don't even know what to think or say, right?
Well, yeah, except Edward said, I didn't like that. That was awful. Because it was that was one of those movies where you're like, oh, I wish they hadn't visualized that.
Yeah,
in a number of scenes. So but it was good. It was very good. Yeah, I would agree with that. So, do you have runners up here? Because I think my runner up for, and this is kind of like saying, and I will stand by this, that Die Hard is a Christmas movie.
Right.
I look at The Nightmare Before Christmas as a Halloween movie.
Yeah, I think it is. Like, it is. Well, I think it just works as both. Like, I don't think there's a wrong answer between it being a Halloween and a Christmas movie. I think it just works either way. That is a movie that I've never watched all the way through.
Oh, wow.
And I want to. Like, I should. And I think my youngest kid, I think she's seen it now. My youngest has really veered away from scary things. And so the last few years have not really been peak scary movie time for us. So that might work now. I would like to see more of that. You know, I do think the ones that are memories for me are like I said, most people when they're teens, they have that phase where they go through watching a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
And for me, when I was, it was probably more like preteen. It was probably like junior high era. I was watching like all of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. Jen and I were at a bar a couple of weeks ago, and they were showing one of them on one of the TVs, and I was just like, why? These movies aren't actually that great. But I sure loved watching them back when I was like 11 or something like that.
Oh, yeah. I did too. And because there was the Halloween movies, it was Nightmare on Elm Street. And then what was the one? There was another one that was like Lakeside, where these kids would always go out to some lake and there was some monster. It was Jason. Who was Jason?
Gosh, what were those?
Yeah, but I saw all of those, and you say you don't remember how some series ended. I can picture that final scene from the original Nightmare on Elm Street like I watched it yesterday.
Wow,
it just like it was such a shock at the end, added into everything. It was just like, oh wow, that's so well done, so well done. I did enjoy those.
Yeah. And I do think Nightmare on Elm Street had a really interesting premise of like
the first one
that he's only going to be able to get you in your dreams. And that's kind of a cool thing. Did you ever watch the Freddy versus Jason spinoff movie?
No.
Neither did I.
No. I had no interest in that.
Yeah. That got a little too cheesy. All right. Let's go to TV shows.
Yeah. So on the TV side, I mean, this could be anything, right? It could be like one-off specials. It could be series. I was thinking, what's your favorite creepy series? Like, is there a TV series that was particularly dark or creepy that you like the most?
I never really got into any of the like super creepy TV series, but the ones that I enjoyed the most, it's more the special episodes. I always, when I was younger, watched The Simpsons Halloween specials.
Oh yeah,
those were so good and so well done. I really like those, and I will admit that when I was younger and watching them, they were legit scary.
Of course,
to me,
of course,
time. Yeah.
No, that's great. I love that. I love that. For me, and I think that I'm a fan of like traditional Victorian horror kind of stuff. So we've watched a lot of this stuff, but I think to its credit, the best that I've seen, the best done is the series I've talked about and we've watched multiple times now called Penny Dreadful. This was a Showtime series that blended multiple Victorian horror storylines together, bringing together all of these characters that from classic stories from Mary Shelley and others. And it was just so clever. And it ran the whole gamut of emotions. You could be scared, you could be sad, you could be excited, you could be touched. I mean, just the way they told these stories was so clever and so engaging. I cannot recommend that series enough unless you don't like creepy and sometimes gory stuff. There's a lot of blood in this series, a lot of blood, but it was so well done. Loved it. Absolutely loved it.
That's a good pick. It's a really good pick.
So I had a question, and I don't know if you're of the right age to be able to answer this one. I thought this was probably an easy gimme that would be fun to answer between us. Munsters or Addams Family?
So I am old enough to remember these shows, and I remember watching both of them. My choice would be Munsters, even though I remember the least about it. Like, I can tell you the names of a lot of the characters from Addams Family, but I remember being a kid and thinking, I like Munsters more than Addams Family.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny, I'm the same way. Although I remember a lot of scenes from the series and just classic, not really tropes, but things that they did all the time in that series, like the monster that lived under the stairs and the telephone booth being a coffin and the grandfather's dungeon that was a hatch under the living room, and just all this stuff that they played on over and over again. I found it to be really entertaining and fun humor, as well as physical humor. And I think that's one of the things that made that different from the Addams Family. I watched an occasional episode of the Addams Family, but I never really watched it like I did. The Munsters one was on after school, and I would try and catch an episode of it. And, back in the day, I didn't know what a rerun was. This was just a fun show on TV that for some reason wasn't in color.
Right.
And it was very entertaining. I really enjoyed that. So that was my favorite there.
And I think it's a little bit unfortunate that Addams Family culturally has clearly won. Like, I think most people are going to say the Addams Family. We've got Wednesday on television now.
Brilliant.
Because the Addams Family is probably the more common answer. But yeah, I was a Munsters kid. Maybe because it was less scary. It seemed less scary.
Oh, totally not scary in any way. It was just so ridiculous.
Yeah. But I loved all those tropes.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to our next category, which would be books.
Yeah, and I think it's a good category because I think for a lot of people, like, if my mom were on this episode, which would be very difficult, but if she were, like, she always would say books are way scarier than movies because it's all in your head and you have to do the job of imagining this situation. So I think there's a lot of people who are like, well, all right, let's get to the good stuff. The good stuff is books. Richard, you and I take a different approach to books, though. So
yes,
we're more audiobook guys, at least over the last few years. Where do you land on scary books?
I land 45 to 50 years ago. Probably 45 years ago when I first read The Shining. 2 books that I read that I thought were just fantastic as a kid. Absolutely scary, but still loved them. The Shining is a classic. I almost feel like that's just a lame answer because so many people might say that, but I absolutely loved that book. It freaked me out. It was wonderful. I've read it multiple times over the years. Another quick follow-up to that was a book by Peter Straub called Ghost Story. And it was around the same time frame, maybe a couple years later. And the thing that made that similarly creepy was that the evil was in people that you knew. And so it wasn't one of these things where there's like this evil force necessarily, but the evil was around you and you just didn't know it. And that really kind of blew my mind. And when I tried to watch the movie that they made of it years later, unlike the various tellings of The Shining, which in their own right are both cool and entertaining, I found the Ghost Story movie just didn't live up to the story that he originally told in the book. So how about you? What would you consider the scariest book? And I know we've talked about this. We hinted at this a little bit before.
Yeah, we did. So I was never a big reader as a kid, and much to my mom's chagrin, I'm sure. But we had a library, an entire library of basically every book Stephen King ever wrote. One of the best American horror authors of our time, right? Because my mom loved Stephen King. And I eventually, as an adult, as a teenager, I read The Green Mile. But The Green Mile, not really scary. And as an adult, I've read some of Stephen King's books. I've read The Stand recently. I talked about that a lot on the show here. I talked on the show previously about reading the Dark Tower series. None of those are really scary, though. The other series that I do want to bring up that I really feel like I missed out on as a kid is basically everything written by R.L. Stine, like the Goosebumps series. I remember as a kid, a lot of my friends like really being into Goosebumps, and then the slightly older targeted books that R.L. Stine wrote. That kids were getting freaked out by these books, and I didn't read them. Partly because I just didn't consider myself a reader, and partly because I think, if I'm being honest, there was a part of me that just didn't want to be scared by reading these books and then having to admit that these books scared me. So, I've got less history with scary books, and I talked a couple of episodes back that I think my way of reading books as audiobooks makes them less scary than even they're intended to be. But I've read a few over the last couple of years, and I don't know if it's the scariest, but it's definitely the one I've enjoyed the most, is the one that I most recently read, and it's called The Haunting of Ashburn House. And I like it a lot for a few reasons. It is super creepy in a couple of ways, and in ways that, like when you're reading a book, there's no jump scares, fortunately, right? You can't have a jump scare in a book, really. But some pretty creepy stuff going on, but that the character has to also solve some problems in this, and that it actually led to a really satisfying ending. It wasn't just like, oh, we killed the monster, yay. Like, there was more to the ending of this book that made it, I think, a more interesting book overall and not just a scary book. So, The Haunting of Ashburn House, I don't think it's that old of a book. You can definitely get it from your library as an audiobook if you're into consuming books that way. I really liked it. I really liked it a lot. Okay. We normally end the show talking about games. We're going to move on to games next, because games, I think, are another medium that if you really allow yourself to be enveloped by the atmosphere of a game, that it can really bring about even more of that horror experience than I think movies can. But maybe more like books, where, books have to, you have to do it all in your head. But because you're controlling the character in a game, I think they can be even scarier than movies. And because of that, I have not played very many of them, because when I've tried, Richard, the good ones are really, really freaking scary. And I'm just like, nope, I can't do this. I can't do this. But I do want to call out a couple of games. The Resident Evil games are like, they probably have the most history as being like really good, scary games. And I remember playing the original Resident Evil on my friend's PlayStation. It was like slumber party sort of situation. Most of the other guys were like off at the computer playing a computer game or whatever. And I was like, well, I'm going to go over to the other room and check out Resident Evil in the dark at 2:00 in the morning or whatever. And that game, like, it's more like, it is a scary scenario because it's zombie apocalypse sort of situation, but it's also a lot of jump scares and stuff. And it was enough. Like, it scared the crap out of me, but not so much so that I wouldn't ever play another Resident Evil game. I dabbled in some of them later, in later years. And frankly, one of the biggest reasons I didn't play more of them was a lot of times the controls just weren't great and stuff. But man, if you want to get into scary games, there's some really good ones out there that I'm not even gonna. Nope. I do want to call out one other one that I did play all the way through. It was a game that we did for a podcast that we used to have here at the DMZ called Story Players. It was a game called Oxenfree. And this game is super accessible now because the studio was purchased by Netflix. So if you have a Netflix subscription, you can play this game on your phone for free. And it's an interesting like adventure game that takes place on an island, and it's like teenage adventure sort of scenario that's perfect for something spooky going on. And it handled like spooky scenarios and stuff really well in a way that isn't going to absolutely scare the crap out of you, but will give you that, kind of that mild to moderate sort of spooky atmosphere that if you're not ready for the super scary games, Oxenfree might be a really fun and not super long. Like I think it's like a 2 to 4 hour game that you can check out if you want to play something kind of scary. Richard, what's your favorite video game?
Scary video game?
Yeah. What's your favorite scary video game?
I mean, Candy Crush isn't very scary. I guess if you're a pig, Angry Birds is scary. Yeah, no, I can't say I have one.
Okay. Sorry. That's what I figured. That's what I figured.
Yeah. All right, so let's move on to our next category. I threw in music with a question mark because I don't think either one of us would be able to pick a favorite Halloween song. I don't know that that's really a thing, but I was curious, are there songs that you immediately associate with Halloween?
It has to be Thriller, right? Like, it just has to be Thriller?
I was curious about that. So it's interesting because I do not.
Really?
I do not associate that with Halloween. I don't remember what time of year that was released, and I distinctly remember the video because I've probably seen it hundreds of times by now in my lifetime, and it's still a classic. And the song and the story is creepy as heck, but I mean, I don't think Halloween for that for some reason. I don't know why.
That's weird, man.
Yeah, I don't know. I could only think of two, both of which are old songs. The one is the classic Monster Mash,
of course.
And, you only hear that this time of year,
right,
basically, because people are playing it because, what else? And the other is one that they kind of popularized in Hocus Pocus, I Put a Spell on You.
Oh, yeah.
And so their rendition of that is something that and any time that I hear "I Put a Spell on You," I think of the Hocus Pocus scene where they sing that, which is so much fun. Which makes me think of Madonna. And if you haven't seen the movie, that you can go watch the movie to get that reference.
Nice.
So yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, Thriller is number one on my list, but you know, because I've still got kids and they're getting older now, but you know, they still want to. They want to do the Halloween stuff, but they don't actually want to be that scared. So, you know, just last week, I was taking my 11-year-old somewhere and she's like, we should put Halloween music on. And I'm like, okay, well then I'm going to make sure it's like kids Halloween music so that it doesn't scare the crap out of you. And so it was Monster Mash, Thriller, the Ghostbusters theme song.
Oh yeah.
This is Halloween from the movie we just talked about.
Nightmare Before Christmas.
Nightmare Before Christmas. The Addams Family title track. Like,
yep.
Those are the things that I'm always thinking about. And I think it's mostly
That's
because
great.
that's the stuff that you're hearing at like kids' Halloween parties.
Yeah.
But Thriller has to be number one. Like all right. It's so weird to me that you don't think of Thriller as a Halloween song.
I don't associate it with Halloween at all. I associate it with high school. I don't associate it with Halloween.
Interesting. Was high school scary for you?
No, that's just when it came out. Well, that's a different question.
It sure is.
All right. Well, I wanted to kind of wrap up, and I say kind of because we have a final bonus question, but I wanted to wrap up with seeing if either you or I know I do, but if we have any sort of Halloween media traditions, so ways that you use media during the Halloween season, whether it's something that maybe you watch every year or an album that you pull out or something that you like to read, or, you know, one of the half a dozen movie marathons that they show this time of year. Anything like that in your household or in your family or history?
In my history, yes. As an adult and stuff, not really, because like I said, Jen, not into scary movies and stuff, and having kids, they never got super into this stuff either. But as a kid, what I remember doing, and man, all of these memories, my parents are gone. Like, I don't know why. Like, I wasn't a latchkey kid, but all of my memories of my parents being out and my older sister had, I'm sure it was a cassette tape, a cassette tape that we just called Spooky Sounds. And I tried seeing if I could find this on Spotify, but it probably wasn't actually called that, or maybe it was, and there's just too many versions of it. And it was like, just like super scary audio. And it, you know, some of it was like the Crypt Keeper from Tales of the Crypt and like just other stuff like that. And it scared the crap out of me. I didn't want my sister to know that. I think she knew that. And I think that's why she kept doing it. But that, I remember that happening a lot when I was a kid. And I mean a kid, like under 10 years old. And my sister playing that really loud throughout the whole house and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. I am pretty confident that somewhere in an unpacked box in this house, I have a vinyl album of spooky Halloween sounds.
Nice.
I'm pretty confident.
So what about you for media traditions?
So a couple of things. So nowadays, I mentioned my favorite Halloween movie is Hocus Pocus. We watch it every year at Halloween. We make an effort. Not only is it on, and so we'll end up catching pieces of it, but we will sit down and watch it one night around Halloween. It's just a fun end-to-end experience and story. So we do that each year. And when I was younger, I would probably say in my 20s, probably, I remember coming out of high school being fascinated with Edgar Allan Poe. And I loved most of the readings we had in school from Edgar Allan Poe. So I kind of continued a tradition, if you will, of every year around this time of year, I would just pick a short story of his and read it because they're all really, really creepy.
Oh yeah. Yeah. He was very messed up, and it led to some really good literature.
Yes. Yes, it did. Yes, it did. And then more recently, and this is just a quirk kind of thing that blends my interests and worlds, is there's an app called OnSwitch that is a third-party controller for Hue lights. And they create a bunch of scenes for lights that are designed to react to sound. Either sound that you feed it or sound that it has as part of a soundtrack that it can play, or streaming holiday themed music. And it could be for any holiday, but Halloween is a great time for this. And so they have a number of different packages of stuff specifically geared toward Halloween. And in the last few years, I've been using that where, for example, maybe it might just be scary sounds like wind and thunder and stuff like that you could pipe outside when the trick-or-treaters are coming, and then lights around the house would blink to the sounds. Or last year, I used something that sounded like someone getting electrocuted, and you don't hear screams, but you hear the bzz, bzz. And it would like disturb all of the outside lights at the time that it was going as if, the power was getting shorted out by somebody getting electrocuted or something like that. So that, I think, is just a kind of a fun way of incorporating Halloween stuff into my smart home. And there's a media component to it because of the audio.
Right. That is really cool. That is very cool.
All right. Bonus round. Hopefully this is a quick one. I think it probably will be.
Yeah.
What's your favorite Halloween candy? Has
Sure.
nothing to do with media.
No, certainly the most delicious question, though. I don't make a distinction between best candy and best Halloween candy because it works for both. And it's got to be Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. And when Eden was really young, she did have a peanut allergy. And that made Halloween like my favorite day because every time she got a Reese's Peanut Butter Cup, it went into my Halloween bag instead of hers.
Wow. Yeah. That's very selfish.
It sure is. But I'm protecting my child, Richard.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. That's how I should have thought of it.
Yes.
Selfless is what I meant to say.
Yes.
Selfless.
Thank you. What about you?
All right. Well, mine is, in fact, a Halloween specific candy. So you can probably guess it's going to be. And I know it's kind of a divisive choice. Candy corn.
Oh.
I am a huge fan
Richard,
of candy corn.
Come on.
It has to be Brock's. They have to be fresh, and only this time of year. None of this Christmas candy corn stuff that comes. That's ridiculous. It's a little too late by then. By then, they're getting hard.
That's true.
Right? So you opened the bag at around Halloween time. It's not going to last until Thanksgiving. So yeah, I'm a big fan of the candy corn. I know people say it tastes like wax. I don't care. I love it. It's my absolute favorite.
I do want to throw in an honorable mention. It's not candy, but it is a Halloween tradition for me.
Okay.
And that is every year. And a lot of times I forget about this, but Jen doesn't. She buys me a box of Count Chocula for breakfast. So every year I have at least one box of Count Chocula to eat in the mornings.
That's funny because I used to buy Edward a box of Boo-Berry because you may recall that Boo-Berry only came out around Halloween for the longest time.
Oh.
Yeah, they stopped making it regularly and they would only come out with it around Halloween. Now you can get it year round.
Okay. And there's a pink one too that's for Frankenstein, I think.
Frankenberry.
Frankenberry. Okay. Yeah, you know this stuff even better than I do. Nice. Yeah, but Count Chocula, it's great cereal. It's not actually like it tastes good, but by 9 a.m. I'm like, all right, where's my real breakfast? Right.
Right. And isn't it kind of like the consistency of Captain Crunch where it more or less just like eats the roof of your mouth?
Yes, this requires extra milk in the bowl, and it's got to sit for a couple of minutes to get a little bit soggier so that it doesn't hurt so much.
Wow,
Yeah.
that sounds delightful.
But it's tradition, Richard.
Just
It's
delightful.
tradition. Yeah. Well, this has been a ton of fun. I'm so glad that the schedule worked out for us to do this. Richard, thanks for taking a little bit of extra time to put out this episode with me.
Absolutely.
This is just yet another episode, but we'll if this is your first time hearing the show, we normally are talking about the ways that you can more easily watch the things that you want to watch, whether that's streaming, TV, movies, how you're listening to music, or playing video games. We're here to make those things easier for you to watch and enjoy all of those different media formats in the way that works the best for you. So if this is your first time hearing this podcast, please subscribe. If you like the video format, we're on YouTube also, where you can subscribe to the channel over there. We're on Twitter at Josh Pollard, at DigiMediaZone. Richard is at Richard Gunther on Mastodon.
Oh, and following up, you asked if I was the only Richard Gunther on Mastodon. Looks like I still am.
Yay. Awesome.
Yep.
Awesome. I wonder if that changes as Threads and stuff starts to integrate into the ecosystem.
Yeah, that could be interesting.
Yeah. But head on over to the show notes, www.thedigitalmediazone.com, to find everything else that we're working on and all of our contact information, because that's going to do it for episode
666.
He's Richard Gunther, and I'm Josh Pollard. Thanks for listening to Entertainment 2.0.
Now get off my lawn. Go!